Sweet. Thank you, Miley. Thank you so much. And thanks to Content Folks for hosting me and Chris today. And we are very excited to talk about 5 common UX designer personality types. As content strategists, content writers, UX writers, we always talk about how the collaboration with that designer should look like. So this is just an attempt, what Kristen and I have been talking, that how we can make this collaboration better. And we always talk about empathizing with our user and getting into the mindset of the user, and then figuring out things that how we can make product better for the user. And this is a similar kind of approach where we'll be talking about how do we empathize with our designers, where they are coming from, what their backgrounds are, just understanding their personality types so that we are able to work well with those. So over to you, Kristen, for your introduction. And Barbara, next slide, please.
Hey all, and Barbara, you can advance a little bit more. Apologies, we had a little bit of difficulty sharing screen, so Barbara very generously offered to help us out with that. So I'm Chris. I am a UX content manager at Amazon, and I work with and manage a global team of UX writers, one in Madrid, one in Austin, and one in Seattle. And a little bit, though, about some of my favorite things so you can get a little bit of a sense of my personality and such is I love wandering through modern art museums. That is just my jam. I like sampling new to me foods, and I really like poorly written action movies. So, for example, tomorrow night, for those of you who are Fast and Furious fans, I will be there. There's no plot. It's just, pure action, and I am there for that after a long week. So I'm going to let Hema introduce herself. You'll see an image in a moment, which is Hema and I met at the Button Conference last year, and we just really connected. And since then, we've just really enjoyed collaborating with each other. And that's what you'll be seeing a little bit of today.
Yeah, thank you. Barbara, 2 clicks, please. One more so that we can see the picture. That was a fun picture, as Chris mentioned, when we met at Button. So we have been together and we have been collaborating on different stuff, and it's been great. About me, my name is Hema, and I am a senior UX writer. I was working with a company, a cybersecurity company, but was recently laid off. So if you see it in my intro, CrowdStrike was a company, but I'm no longer with them. I have been working with, Intuit and US Bank, and I have over a decade of experience in both UX writing and content strategy. 2 weeks back, I was presenting at Confab, which was my second talk on about how we can communicate the value of our role, what content people do, and how we can collaborate with our team. And I think it went well. I am still enjoying that moment, when I was giving that talk and talking to the audience and meeting the community. And again, I'm so excited to be here. When I'm actually not writing or not thinking too much, then I love playing with the Rubik's Cube. And I always try to time myself up. I'm really bad at it, but I just like to, play with it. Also, one thing I enjoy, and I'm up for a challenge anytime, is the tongue twisters. So if it is she sells seashell near the seashell, or Betty bought a better butter, but the butter was bitter, so Betty bought a bitter butter, but the butter was bitter, anything like that, send it my way. It keeps me awake, and I love that. And definitely, I think as writers, we love listening to music all the time. So that's what I do. Next slide, Barbara, please.
So what are we going to talk about today? And Barbara, if you don't mind, one more click. This is a quote I really like from Jared Spool. Our users don't separate our design from our content. They think of us as one and the same. So why don't we? UX design and UX writing, content design, they go hand in hand. So that's not to say that that relationship is always free from challenges or friction, but we really wanted to concentrate today on some tips and tricks that Hema and I have come up with over time and working with various folks on how to collaborate better with UX designers. I think with UX designers, there's several levels at which we really come together in a true partnership. One, just from the work point of view, when you have design, the UX, the UI, those visuals, and the content working together, it creates a more seamless experience for your end customer. But then on the whole other side of UX, which is actually advocating for UX, showing its impact, working with business stakeholders, having your UX designer as a partner in that process can be just hugely validating and also just a good process for one another. So today we're going to go through 5 common personality types. Obviously, there are plenty of others. We wanted to just start the conversation with some of these. And as we go through, you will certainly recognize some of the folks that you've worked with in the past. So we're very interested in our Q&A and exploring some of these in more depth. And maybe you'll have a few that you wanted to add to these as we go. So that's a little bit of the background about how we're going to look at this, and I'll turn it over to Hema to talk through the 5 that we're going to go through.
All right, let's get started. Barbara, one more click, please, and then we'll be on our first personality type, Max. Max is the been there, done that designer. Barbara, I would want you to click one more time so we can see what's in the bubble. And how do you identify Max as a designer who's been there and done that? Is probably you'll come across some of the designers who can probably come with you, start working on a project. And as content people, we realize that Max wants to do both the design and the writing for us too. And the things they would say is that, hey, I can do both the design and writing, no lorem ipsum for me. I totally believe that lorem ipsum should not go in the design, but don't worry, because I have done writing in the past, I can definitely add all the words because I know how to write. And you can just come in and you can just check for the strings and check for the copy. It would be so easier for us. How I wish it was easy for us, but as UX writers, we probably want to be included in those conversations beforehand. And I'm sure that if somebody comes in and says, oh, we are going to do the writing work for you, oh yeah, we would love that, but that's our job. So how do you communicate that? But then also understanding here is that where is Max coming from? So, understanding that what their background is, that kind of becomes more important. Why Max is the been there, done that designer. So I would say that if you come across a designer who really is good in designing, plus they also want to do the writing, I know it could be a difficult situation many times, but just understand that maybe by talking to Max, you would realize that the background they have is that they have worked in the capacity of a UX generalist. That would mean that they were probably working in a startup culture or a fast-moving company where they were the only person and it was a smaller team and they were asked to just do everything. So they would be the designer, they would be the researcher, they would do the QA, and they would just set up some meetings with their time. So they're very much used to doing things in their own way, and that's where they're coming from. And their design approach could look like that, okay, I got this problem, and now I'm going to solve this. Let me just get my, deep dive into this project. Let me just get some boards up and running. And then I'm going to share it with my PMs, business stakeholders, and I'll have most of the conversations with them. And they might just sometimes forget because they feel that, oh, they can write very well. So it happens naturally to them that they do not consider writing sometimes, and they might just forget you inviting to the meetings, which I know is a challenge for UX writers to be involved in all the meetings. And they probably think that UX writing is more for finishing copy and correcting typos. And that's where they would say, hey, I'll call you at the end of the project when we have to do the string check. Everything is clear. I know the story flow. I can do a storytelling. So let's work at that. And I know that it could be hard. Like we all have probably met Max in our UX writing journeys. So how do we deal with that? Barbara, over to the next screen, please. One more click. All right, so if I were to meet a Max and if I hear what they said to me, I would just say, oh, wonderful. I'm glad that I'll have another set of expert eyes to look at the.
Have we lost Hema?
I think I was wondering if that was just mine, but it stalled for me as well.
Yeah. Oh, we've got you back.
Oh,
Yeah.
now I'm back. What happened?
Yes, just at the end of finishing the quote.
Okay, this one. Oh, wonderful. All right, yeah, let's get started again. I don't know what happened, but yeah. So yeah, be appreciative of whatever Max is bringing in, because definitely as writers, we always want our work to be peer reviewed. And if you can build that relationship with your designer, where your designer is smart enough to actually look at the copy, I would see it in a very positive way. And this is what I'll tell them in a very positive tone. Over to the next screen, please, Barbara. Some things you can also do to, build this relationship with Max, who has been there, done that designer, is that early on, if you figure out that, okay, my designer wants to do the writing part for me, so you have to establish clear swim lanes, as you would have done via that code, that I would like another set of eyes to look at my copy. So you are establishing boundaries. You are making sure that they understand that you are coming in as a writer. So you need to have that discussion. You can discuss ways of working that, hey, I appreciate that you're going through the flow and you are also adding content, but I want to be included in those meetings and I want to look at the content so that I can jump in and I can make my own changes, because this is something I would want to do. And then I will get it reviewed by you. So, having that talk, maybe setting up some collaboration time so that you stay on top of what words are going in. And like I have worked in the past where the designer would write the copy and someday there would be a design review session and I would go into that design review session where there are 50 or 60 designers, writers, and the leadership is sitting, and then I will look at the screen and I'll like, oh, those were not my words, oh, this is not the best copy. But then nobody knows, and then people start thinking that this UX writer has written that, and it gets super hard just to raise your hand and say, I have not looked at this copy, my designer wrote it. So before you get into awkward situations like this, it's very important that you set up collaboration time, you stay on top of your work, you reinforce the benefits of working together, that how it could be helpful. You can tell them that, hey, you know what, this is our voice and tone. I appreciate your copy. It's not wrong, but this is the voice and tone I am going to follow. So I need to look at everything. And then if things will get like still a little complicated, it gets like that sometimes, the designer might just tell you that, hey, we need to move fast, we don't have that much of time, I'll come and write the copy, you don't want to slow the process, then I might as well advise to create another source of truth for UX content and keep sharing it with your larger teams, and say that while my designer is working on these Figma files or Zeppelin files and they're adding their content, but I am creating my own source of truth, which could be a Google Doc or something, and start sharing it with the team that whatever words are there should be the words which are going into design. We want to move fast, so I'm not going to look into designs and change that there, but this is my source of truth. So you have to figure out ways, but it will work well if you get into the shoes of your designer and understand what their background is and why they are doing what they're doing. Over to the next slide.
Great, one more click. Perfect, Barbara. And so meet Marcus. Marcus is the newbie designer. So something you might hear from Marcus, man, I have never worked on a project like this. Do you know who I should talk to first? And how do I get added to the Figma instance? By the way, you are the first UX writer, content designer that I've ever worked with. Where do you want to start? So I really enjoy working with a new UX designer, lots of energy, just excited to be part of the process. I find in terms of their background that either they're right out of a graphic design program or they've gone through some sort of certification program and they're transitioning from visual design to UX design, or maybe a design technologist to UX design. So their design approach, what I have encountered is that they try to pool a big group of potential partners early on in the process. And then throughout the design process, they sort of weed out who needs to be involved at what point, instead of establishing clear swim lanes from the beginning. That can be good or bad. It's just something to be aware of. I take it as a good sign that they are open to a strong collaboration, but might not have a lot of direction right from the beginning. So how they interact with UX writers is that they look to the UX writer to really define that working relationship. So if we can advance in terms of how to work with a UX designer like Marcus, and Barbara, you can keep going. There we go. I start with, hey, no worries. We have all been there. I'm happy to share what's worked with me with other UX designers, and then we can come up with what works best for us. And if you can advance. So a few things that I've done in the past that have helped is I try to provide education for how a UX writer does their job in the context of the design process overall. So I know it's a little old school, but I go back to the design double diamond for those who are familiar with that, but essentially put the context of how UX writing fits into the design process overall. So, point out to a new UX designer. So during discovery, for me as a UX writer, I'm going to be going out and doing competitive analysis and or I'll be doing this task when we get more into the development phase. So in other words, I explain UX writing in the context of the design process overall. And then I give examples of how I've worked with UX designers in the past, but I don't force that new designer to fit into one of those molds. I tend to work differently with different UX designers depending on our personality types, how we mesh, and the project itself. And then finally, be open to change. Your new UX designer has a lot to bring to the process, a lot of new ideas, new energy. So I try to be open to the ideas that they have working together as well. Hema is going to introduce you to the next personality type.
All right, meet Mo, the pretty please designer. Mo is excellent, and Mo designers like Mo, they are design perfectionists. So I'm sure that we all have worked with Mo, and Mo's focus is basically, are the designs looking beautiful? How I can make these visuals so perfect that every pixel looks so perfect, and it just awes the user, and they are like, oh wow, this is the best design I have ever seen. So their entire focus is on design rather than the usability or what the user pain points are. Whenever you would probably want to have conversation that, hey, I feel that this flow should look like this, you might hear an answer, but I cannot change the designs. I have really worked hard on these designs, and I feel like if you have to come in and write copy, then just try to adjust around the design, but rather not ask me to change the design, because these designs look really great. So they love their work, what they're doing, but they're more focused on making designs perfect rather than making experience perfect for the user. So how do we, and as I said, the background is that they're design perfectionists and they prioritize design, and they always have a design first approach and not great flow that can be fixed with additional words. So what do you tell to a designer who comes and tells you that visuals come above all else, everything is secondary to a beautiful design, even the UI, even the copy? I should charm everybody with the design. So what do you do? Next screen, please, Barbara. Yeah, start by saying, I love the designs, appreciate for the work they are doing. They are passionate about their designs, and we have to acknowledge that yes, whatever designs you have built, you are amazing at your job and they look perfect. But then can we just take a step back and look at the end-to-end user flow and talk about it, and then see that what is missing? And maybe nothing is missing. Your designs are so perfect, we don't need to change anything, but it would just be helpful to me, because when I'm coming into the project as a UX writer, I am not just adding words to these designs, but I also want that the flow should look good. Also tell them that, hey, you know what? Oh, can we move to the next screen so we can read more, Barbara? All right, so communication is the key, which I was talking about, that you need to communicate. Then you have to highlight the user needs by asking them to come into a usability session so that you can just look at the end-to-end flows. It might happen that, when you have that kind of collaboration with Mo and you're looking at the flows and you tell them that, hey, you know what, these designs are perfect, but I feel that the user is going to be stuck here and they would not know what to do. I can always write the words. I can totally come in and write the words, but just understand that the more I'll have to write, the more your designs will move around, and that wouldn't look good because it would be more content heavy. And I think more you wouldn't want to do that, because then the focus would shift from design to reading content. And I'm sure this trick always works because they understand it. So rather than, just saying that, hey, this is not the best way to work, just tell them where you're coming from. Leverage customer testing or research if you have those things done, if you have a researcher on your team, if you truly understand that this could be a pain point for the user with the way designs are being done, you can always back your argument up with that and say that, hey, it's not just me because I want to write in, this is what the research has told, and we really need to address this, because even if the designs are good and users are not happy, then it's not a good reflection on our teamwork. So start talking about that if needed. If you can get early on in the process with Mo, and you know that you worked on one project and this was how this is what you had to deal with, maybe in the second project you'll be more prepared, and you can say, hey, we can start with a whiteboarding workshop, so that before you even design, we look at everything from user perspective, so I don't have to come in at the last moment and say, let's change the designs. And then always explaining that UX content isn't a band-aid for bad design. Content should not be done later on in the stage because users are not able to move in the flows, and then I have to come in and just add more and more words. So keep reinforcing all these things and keep talking to more is passionate about their work. Once they'll understand that, it would be a beautiful, beautiful collaboration that you can set up with your designer. Next screen, Barbara. Over to you, Chris.
I think I find myself saying at least once a day, content is not a Band-Aid for, either lack of tech capabilities or design. That said, sometimes I do have to acquiesce on that one, which kind of leads us into meet Matt, the sure whatever designer. So I'd say something you might hear from a UX designer like Matt is, I have done this project loads of times. I already know what the blockers are going to be. I'm going to start mocking this up based on the tech requirements. And I want to be a little sensitive about a designer like Matt. I don't mean to at all disparage, because I feel like sometimes as a content designer, I have been here. So it's a matter of how do you collaborate in a space where one of you might be pretty discouraged or have been around the block so much that it can get taxing. So the background for a designer like Matt, they've been at the same company, maybe on the same project for a long time. They've seen their designs get diluted over and over again by constraints, whether it's legal and compliance or whether it's tech requirements, or they started their P0 version and they had this amazing version planned out that never comes. Their design approach is they're more apt to start out with solutions than customer problems. And the way they interact with UX writers kind of reflects that. They tend to make the design and content updates proactively, and then just ask for a final check of the hi-fi mocks. So if you don't mind advancing, Barbara, where do you start out then with a designer like that? It's like, sure, whatever. I find it helps to come back to the energy and the interest in the design process itself. So, hey, can we brainstorm around the customer problem? If you don't mind, keep going. In terms of some more specific tips, ideate together on that customer problem. That can really get exciting. You can bring in then the PMs, maybe even tech or your marketing partners, to kind of think through the customer problem in a new way. Get involved in those meetings between the product managers and your stakeholders, those meetings where you can learn a little bit about where some of those tech constraints or other constraints, they might seem like they're blockers, but maybe they aren't really. Push back in those meetings. It could be that the designer has already had all of these arguments with all of these folks. So then you can go ahead and keep advocating for your user. And finally, frame up those content recommendations around user needs, not just with your UX designer, but also with that wider team that maybe has been resistant in the past, to the point where the designer that you're working with has become a little bit discouraged.
I would just like to add on sure whatever designers, and I had a personal experience working with a designer who would always come back and say, like, I got into this new team and they were there, they had worked with this at this place for years, and whenever I would get excited about anything, I'll tell them, hey, should we do some research on this? Should we do some customer testing? Sure, whatever. Nobody is going to hear you anyway. They will do what they want to do. Should we talk to legal and compliance? Yeah, you go ahead. They'll never listen to you. So sometimes it was very discouraging, as Chris was saying, but then I also saw that this was a great opportunity for me to step up and change a few things and show them that people are going to listen to you if you bring in, valid facts, and if you tell them that why you are suggesting this approach. So it's not that, every time they'll tell you that, sure, whatever, it's your chance to rise up and shine in that moment and show them that how you can change the things and you can change people and you can create a new mental model. So I think it worked very well for me in my previous job, where I would be like, okay, this person is not interested, but what if I go in and I start being interested into all these things, and then I bring them along with me, and then we can create more impact. So it's another way to look at that. And while moving to the last designer here, who's Mia, the let's do this designer, the dream designer, the ideal designer, the best designer. And this is a quote, which is a true quote, which probably Chris had shared and someone in her team had said as a designer, which we brought it just like that. And she said, or they said, Writers are rad. Together we'll create an awesome experience. Who do you think would be better to lead this project? UX writers or UX design? Let's talk. I really know that we all people in content wish for working with designers like Mia, the Let's Do This designer, who understand what UX writers are bringing to the table and how they would love to collaborate. And it's partly because they have experience working with UX writers and they have exposure across different aspects of design. They understand that a good design is more than a partnership with all cross-functional teams, including the writers. And these are the designers where you'll never have to worry whether they're calling you into the meetings or you're missing out, because they would make sure that you are invited to these meetings. I really had, I was very lucky because I have worked with so many Mias, the Let's Do This designer, and one particular designer who I worked with. And whenever people would ask any questions about content, they would just say, I don't know, Hema is here. Ask her. She's the UX writer. Initially, I felt honestly that, oh my God, she's putting me on spot all the time. But then I started to understand it that no, she is giving me, she's bringing the spotlight to me because that's what is needed. And once I saw that this was how it's going in all the meetings, I was like, oh yeah, maybe I'll have to answer some of the questions which people will ask. So I was more prepared, but I also thanked them and valued them because they never came into the game and said that, oh, I can work on this UX copy, or I am a designer who has written that. They would just raise their hands and say, oh, she's here, ask her. So people started to look at me from UX writing perspective, and all the questions were coming to me. And I really appreciated that. So if you have a Let's Do designer, Barbara, can you move to the next screen? Yeah, you should just say, hey, you are amazing. I am psyched we get to work together. I just love it. And I would want to work more and more with you. Next screen, please. So show your enthusiasm. If you have got this fabulous designer working on your side, you have to strengthen that partnership. And what you could also do is, because they have such a great background and they know the value of UX writing, they also know that any product or any customer pain point we are going to solve has to be done in a more, holistic way. There are so many things we have to look at. It's just not design and writing, but I'm sure this designer would also value where research is coming in. How do we talk to the PMs? What are engineering limitations? So they would know everything. And it's a good opportunity for people, who are into UX writing or who are just coming into UX writing to learn all those things from this designer and apply it in your things, because the more you learn from them, the more you will be able to take it forward and help others, maybe a new designer who doesn't know, and you can apply all those things in your work and you can make this partnership really stronger and solid partnership. Plus, what you can also do is, just because this, the relationship is going so well, you can bring it together and you can make case studies out of it, and showcase it to your team that how this awesome collaboration could create so much of impact. So that's another thing which I've done in the past, is that once I had this kind of designer who's easy to work with and who appreciated what I was bringing to the table and I appreciated what they were doing, then I started working on building case studies, and I would present it on my team and saying that just because of this partnership, we were able to achieve this, we were able to impact so much on the product. So if all the designers and if all the writers can work like this, that would be so amazing. So it's a good, you're setting your team for success by doing this collaboration with your designer, who is anyway very much willing to collaborate with you. So cherish that and enjoy that. You won't find many designers like this, but we wish that we all get to work with designers who are really understanding the value of what UX content brings. Next screen, please.
And you can advance one more. We wanted to finish off with just a few final thoughts and tips for you to think about. So on top of all the things we discussed with particular personality types, here's a few kind of ways to up-level that collaboration. So first, explain, don't assume. So whether you're working with, a Mia who is an awesome UX designer to work with, or a newbie, whoever you're working with, don't assume that they understand what a UX writer does, what a content designer does, or how to involve you in the process. Explain as you go, and that'll help reinforce what you do, how you do it, and your impact on the project. Use a retro. at the end of a project, go through, what worked well, what didn't work well, and not just with the project details itself, but actually your working relationship. Hey, did you like it when I went into the Figma files, or would it be faster if I created a separate branch within Figma? Some of those things that can make your collaboration go even more smoothly the next time. And finally, building off what Hema talked about before with those case studies, think of ways to create visibility within your business stakeholders, within your UX and business leadership about what you're doing. Doing that as a team in connection with your project can be huge. So that case study, don't just prepare it for your own UX team. Encourage your manager to share it with their manager and with their direct reports. Offer to do it yourself. If there are opportunities within your workplace to do seminars, lunch and learns, set them up. You are trying to create some visibility for the work that you do and for this collaboration that you have with the UX designer. And that really benefits both your working relationship, which then reflects in that end customer experience, but then also helps you develop as a UX practitioner as well. So with all of that in mind, we are really excited to hear from you about what kind of personality types you have encountered in your workplace, and any kind of tips that you would want to share with this group about what you have found helpful. And I really do appreciate everyone who's here this evening.